Well, it all started with 18 friends on a driveway in Lowell to becoming the granddaddy of all 3-on-3 basketball organizations, the Gus Macker. Celebrating his golden anniversary as founder, let's welcome Scott McNeal. Scott, been a while since we've chatted. I used to play in the Macker back in the heyday of the early to mid 90s, but looking back at it and just looking at you, how is 50 years possible with this?
It's kind of scary when you think about having to go through everything we did to try to get here. I mean, it's been a long haul to 50 years. We've enjoyed every moment, though.
So Ted kind of mentioned a little bit of the backstory, but for some of our listeners who aren't like Matt or Ted, who played in this tournament, numerous times, he mentioned how it kind of started with 18 friends for an $18 prize. What was the origin story of that first tournament? And I mean, 13 years later, you move it to Belding because it's growing so quickly. What was that like? And what was that first initial tournament like?
Well, the first initial tournament was just a bunch of guys that gathered in my parents' driveway. My mom and dad we lived as a family. I had a younger brother, Mitch, who at the time was a freshman. I was a junior in high school. And we lived about 2 blocks from the Lowell High School. In our court or driveway just happened to be a decent basketball hoop. And we just gathered there and socialized and played basketball. And really, kind of the gist of it is March Madness hit, and back then you didn't go on spring break like people do today. So we were trying to find out something to do. Still had the bug. Our Lowell teams were not very good, so we didn't go very far in districts, and decided that we would play for a tournament. Didn't really think we were going to do it very often, but we thought, God, if we play for money, we'll get away from what had been a stagnant competition in the driveway, playing the same guys over and over. So we just decided to play for money. Had a little draft in mom and dad's living room with 6 of the older of us, and we drafted the rest of the guys, and it got kind of carried away with all the stuff. The driveway became our mom and dad's driveway became our Hall of Fame. One of the guys was going into communications in a year or two in college, and so he had a video camera and called it the Macker Sports Network. And when we played in the driveway, I don't know if you guys were the same, but we played music all the time.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we called it WGUS. We just kind of got a little happy with goofing around. But anyway, that first tournament, one of the guys won, who was the last pick because he was the tallest guy, 6'3" in the neighborhood. Decent player, so we made him draft last. He won. We decided it was so much fun, we'll do it the next year. And so it went like that 2 or 3 years with just guys in the neighborhood or in the Lowell group. And at that point, we'd gone on to college. And so we decided, hey, why don't we let other people enter and you bring your own team versus us drafting and playing for $1 a head. And that's kind of where it really kind of grew really quickly because people came, and that's kind of how we got into dividing people by their age, height, and experience. We had known that one of my friends had said he was going to bring a college player. So we said, well, we're going to have 2 flights, those that are pretty good and the rest of us that are from the neighborhood that aren't.
Right.
And at the time, he brought a 6'7" starting forward for Central Michigan's team, Leon Guyden, who was from Grand Rapids.
I remember him.
Pretty well-known guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, he kind of snuck him into the tournament, and we all freaked out that a college guy was going to play in our driveway. And we went to trophies because that was kind of humorous. The athletic director at Lowell called my brother in. By that time, we'd gone on to college. Called my brother and some of the others in and said, I think if the money got any higher, you might lose your amateur status. So, so a lot of what we did back then was just having fun, and it just kind of fell into this unique thing. And in those late 70s, early 80s, it was kind of a West Michigan hoop dream to go play in this neighborhood. And we had to roll from mom and dad's driveway to 2 or 3 courts out in the street because we were playing till 1, 2 o'clock at night in the driveway. Not enough game time in a weekend. And 2 or 3 courts became 5 courts, and it just kind of got carried away. At our peak in Lowell, which was in 1986, I think we had like 88 courts strung up and down the streets around mom and dad's house. It was pretty crazy at that point. We knew something wild was happening because everybody was coming and following us. They wanted other tournaments like this in their towns, or a couple professional groups came and we're going to run them. One was out of Dallas, was going to run a big one there, and somebody's going to run one somewhere else. So anyway, it was getting pretty big in the 80s there.
And then the rest is history, right? And it's still going today. I mean, like Jared mentioned, I played in the early 2000s. I graduated high school in 2003, and then a group of friends and we played 5 or 6 years in a row. We played up in Ludington, and we always just had a blast playing up there. And it seems like it was also probably still at the peak. You would obviously know the numbers. It was still at the peak in the early 2000s, kind of like what Ted was saying. But the way that you describe that, it sounds like stuff that me and my friends used to do back in high school. Get together in someone's backyard, draw up the bracket, like the March Madness bracket, and play a little basketball 3-on-3 tournament. You just turned yours into a huge phenomenon, basically, Gus Macker. The question I want to ask you, though, is, so I've played in Gus Macker. Our hometown, there's a festival in the summer. It's in the spring that used to have a big 3-on-3 tournament that I played in. I've played in one that was called Air It Out. I played in the Red Hacker that I was telling these guys about. That was really cool. So I've played in a number of 3-on-3 basketball tournaments because it was a really big deal when I was that age, high school and college. Most of those have fallen off, though. Why has Gus Macker been able to, even if it's not the same as it was at its peak, why do you think Gus Macker has been able to hold on, even if the younger generation isn't as into 3-on-3 basketball, as my generation?
Yeah, I really think it's the fact that we're kind of carried away with it a little bit. The other ones had little niches. The Red Hacker had a dunk tournament going there, or a dunk court. There was other little things that I did. At Macker, we just kind of felt like those were cool other events that we really didn't think of as competitive because we knew the Macker was going to be the big one. And so we kept building it up and playing off of the history. I mean, just things happen for us. One of the things that's happening this summer with our 50th is we've invited back the gentleman that wrote the Sports Illustrated article, Alexander Wolf, in 1985. And kind of what happened for us was when that article came out, then we became more of a national name, and became more nationally known. And so we always kind of thought, okay, if we're going to be nationally, we better have the best baskets, the best basketballs, the best trophies, so that people live and die to play in our event. Even though we knew they're playing in these other ones, it was like they were a warm up for ours.
Right.
Yeah.
Today, I think longevity wise, part of it is myself and a few others are obsessed by it. So where other people probably got a little burned out, because you can get burned out from doing events. It really is easy. People working with the general public, if they don't win, they're upset. Back then, also, the other thing that hit 3-on-3 coming out of the early 2000s, as you talk, the Ludington event is definitely the most popular in modern times of Gus Macker. And that's because it has the beach and all this other stuff. But what hurt us and hurt all 3-on-3s is the physical roughness of the event. It just got crazy. You called your own fouls and violations, and we tried to make it like our neighborhood, which is what that was like. But when it got so popular, winning was everything. And people would change their teams and go get guys that look like they're on steroids or whatever. And so they'd win because they just physically abuse the other team. Right. So kind of what we've done today is we've gone to game officials and we actually blow whistle on all the courts. And the roughness factor isn't nearly what it was. So we see a resurgent in our brand, mainly because we've kind of become a family festival. And you'll see in my list of cities, I'm in a lot of small towns now, where back then I was in pretty big cities here in the Midwest. So I don't know that I have the exact answer, but I mean, we're just really kind of into it and always thinking we're going to come up with the next idea that's going to be really cool and make ours different from the other people. So I think we've lasted because of that. And it was, it's just something that kind of happened and continues to be that way, even today's world, even though it's not nearly as large, it still has an impact in the cities, whether it's raising money for a charity or closing down the downtown. Anyway, we're having a lot of fun doing it, but it's still a challenge for us.
Yeah.
I got kind of a two-parter here, Scott. Number one, my memory might be foggy, but we're three of us are from Corunna, right?
Oh,
Here
yeah.
in Shiawassee County. Now, is it my memory correct that you actually grew up originally in Durand before you moved to Lowell?
No, I actually grew up in Lowell, and I
Okay.
graduated from Central Michigan in '79.
Right.
And I was a school teacher with the idea the whole story became, I was obsessed not only by the Macker, and I didn't realize how big the Macker was getting, especially in '79. I was going to be a coach, because if I was too short, I was not athletic. So the only way I was going to stay in basketball is I was going to coach. So I went into teaching and coaching. Didn't get a job immediately out of Central Michigan, came close in a number of places. And my ex basketball coach from Lowell, along with the ex-football coach, had become the principal and assistant principal in Durand.
Ah, there's the connection.
And they had next door to their offices was the community education department and rec department, and a person that was the rec director had just quit. And this is on a Friday, and they said, they'll give you the job if you're here Monday to start. So I went to the other side of the state thinking, well, I'm not going to get a teaching job right away. So I went about 2 years there, and then they eliminated the job, kind of pink slipped me. So I came back to Lowell at that point and started substituting. I ended up with a job in the '80s in Kent City, where I was a social studies teacher for 7th and 8th grade, and girls and boys, girls varsity for a few years, boys JV for 6-7 years, basketball coach.
Very cool. Well, back to the Macker, you talked about the SI article in '85, and that kind of exposed you throughout the country as an organization, as something everybody wants to be a part of. And it really is a way of life, obviously, for you and your family and all the people that have participated in the Macker. When did you, after you moved from Lowell to Belding, where it's world headquarters now, when did you realize that, this can be a full-time gig and I can actually make some money at this?
Well, in the money never really quite got to the point, but 1987 is when I was still teaching in Kent City, and a gentleman from Grand Rapids owned an advertising agency. His name was Jim Messner, and his clients were Chevrolet dealers, especially around the Midwest. And so his kid had played in the tournament because he was from Lowell, and he said, I ought to take this to different cities, Cincinnati, Milwaukee, Decatur, Illinois, places where he had Chevrolet dealer groups, like the Greater Cincinnati Chevrolet dealers, the Gold Star Chevrolet dealers of Milwaukee. And they would fund the thing and make it a festival with them being the sponsors. And oh my gosh, that thing just went great. Basically what happened is I took a leave from teaching, and he hired me to work at his agency and run these events the first year or two, and also funded me initially to get the portable baskets that I had to have made. I actually had them made in Belgium overseas.
Oh my.
There's a lot of weird stories with Gus Macker. Just again,
we love it.
Most of these weird stories are honestly true that I just fell into. It wasn't like I sat down and go, oh God, let's plan this out. I mean, it just same way as my very first sponsor, Jim Messner, and I had Nike give me some free t-shirts in Lowell. So he was with me and said, well, we got to get a sponsor to help fund some of this. So he calls Nike up out of the clear blue and tells who we are. And we had the Sports Illustrated thing, so people knew who we were, and said, do you want to sponsor this national tour that I'm going to start in '87 with Scott? And they didn't call back right away. So he said, well, who's right with Nike at the top? And back then Reebok was 1 or 2 with Nike all the time. So he called Reebok. Guy got on the phone, and close to $100,000 deal was done over the phone because he didn't want Nike to get it. It was really weird. So I just kind of fell into these kind of deals that made us viable nationally. Now, we had competitors on a national level through the 90s that were pretty large and really big. We kind of stayed more, and that kind of gets back to that question, why were you able to keep it going, is we kind of stayed closer to our roots. We still go and run the tournaments. I'm still at the events. Like this weekend, I'm in Mount Pleasant at Central Michigan. I go to an event almost every weekend. So I'm still out there doing it, where most of the people were removed or had agencies running them on a bigger level nationally.
Right.
We just kind of felt like it had to have more of the flavor of the neighborhood. So we kind of stayed with nonprofits and that kind of stuff.
You mentioned kind of some of the locations, like Ludington is the one that Matt has a great picture he's going to show in a little bit of, looking over the water. It's beautiful. You mentioned how it's kind of like you stick sort of more to your roots. What goes into picking the locations you go to? It seems like it's always at the cool spots, like whether it's on the downtown street or, like I mentioned, Ludington, it's looking over the water. What goes into picking the right city or town, and how do you pick where you're going to actually put the courts in those towns?
And great question. A lot of people think we decide. Basically, it's these groups from these towns contact us, and we're almost like a franchise. We have our national headquarters, and I send a team out. We also train them, and we work with these groups year round, kind of consulting with them. But they kind of own it and agree to do a Macker system that we built. And we have this Macker Bible of how to do the event. And we give them that, train them at a conference, work with them, and then we come in with our team and work with the local groups. So it's the local groups saying, yeah, we'll do it, and we agree to what you're going to do and how the funding's going to work between us. So it's a partnership between us and could be a YMCA, a Boys and Girls Club, and so forth in East Town. So a lot of them are that way, and most of them that have decided to do a Macker really kind of go crazy, and that's why you see them in unique settings or cool places, is because they knew if they were going to do a Macker, they had to pay quite a bit more. It's a lot bigger process than maybe me just dropping in like Barnum and Bailey. I really, the development of that relationship is what makes it go.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot that goes into it. A lot of volunteers involved too, and it's not just, hey, let's wheel some hoops in and have a little 3-on-3 tournament. I know it's quite the process to plan one of these things. Jared mentioned, I was going to show a picture of Ludington. So one of my nephews, like I said, I played in Ludington quite a bit, and one of my nephews, he's like middle school age. He's playing right now with one of his buddies. They played last year. They're going to play this year in Ludington, and he wanted me to bring up this picture right here. I mean, is that not like the coolest setting for a 3-on-3 basketball tournament right there with the Badger in the background? And that's his team right there, Lanesburg, in the red jerseys. That's actually my nephew dribbling the ball right there. Just the coolest setting. I mean, Ludington, obviously I'm a little biased, but it has to be one of the cooler settings for a 3-on-3 basketball tournament of any of these. He had a question for you that he wanted me to ask. How did you come up with Gus Macker? What does it mean? And then the second question was, do you have any tips for him to help his team win the whole tournament?
Love it.
Well, the easier answer is the Gus Macker thing was I was in middle school, and the shop teacher gave one of my friends the job of putting names on everybody's shop locker. And it was like 6th or 7th grade. And instead of putting a real name, he put like what he thought everybody's nickname should be. And people would call me Matt because my last name is McNeal. And he had grabbed Gus and slapped it on the front of Mac. And at one time we thought it was one word, Gus Macker. And really with no other reasoning behind it, other than at the 25th, this guy gets up, who we put in the Hall of Fame because he gave me a nickname. And he said it was a famous Italian league legend, Gustav Macaroni. But I mean, really the interesting part is Gus Ganakis was a head coach at Michigan State.
Right.
And so we wonder if he kind of said, I grabbed that name from there. And when Gus Ganakis heard that prior to his passing a few years back, oh my gosh, he was on the radio. I met with a few times because he was at a Lansing event we ran and stuff. And he was so honored that Gus Macker came after him a little bit, the name did. So anyway, that was awesome. Who was coaching when we were in high school and early college at Michigan State.
Well, you bring up Gus Macker again. that's branding. I mean, you got just a tremendous brand. I mean, look at the guy with the hat, the top hat. I mean,
Great.
on all the T-shirts like
We
Matt
got really
has. I mean, where
Yeah,
did
it's really-
where did all that fall into place, Scott? All the marketing and the branding. I mean, it's brilliant.
And again, I wish I could say I had an agency that did it. My mom, when we were doing this in the neighborhood, one of the reasons that it became bigger is mom was a secretary at the Amway Corporation, about 6 miles down the road
Yep.
at Ada.
Right.
And so she would type the stuff up on her corporate typewriter in between stuff and make copies that we take around to the classes and stuff, or to the kids in the school, as to whether they paid their dollar and all that. Well, 2 doors down from her was the artist from Amway. They had one artist back in that time frame, and she just went down and asked him one day, "Hey, would you do a quick drawing? My kids are running this event in the driveway." And that guy
awesome.
came up with it, and mom gave him a T-shirt.
Wow.
And I still think to this day it was when Magic Johnson was on Sports Illustrated with a top hat, cane kind of thing.
Oh,
He
right.
kind of looks
Yeah.
like the Planter Peanut guy. I
Yeah.
still
Right.
think a little bit of that might have rubbed off on it, but
Hey.
just became, and we were with that stagnant peanut looking guy for years. And then we ran into another artist, young guy in Grand Rapids, who could animate him, make him look
awesome.
like any type of activity. I mean, he did about everything with the Gus Macker guy. And so now to this day, we're constantly revolving what he looks like. He's the same guy, but
Yeah.
we're always updating it to stay fresh with the kids. I mean, there's a lot of things we're doing. The other thing I was going to add is how to win at a Macker. Back in the day, the way to win is our program took your age first, your height second, and your experience third.
Yep.
So if you could find some guys that weren't very experienced but played a lot in the driveway that didn't quite make it to 6 foot,
Yep.
you ended up in a division of shorter guys in your age category that were least experienced. And so you ended up on a lesser court. That's kind of how to find them, is rather than somebody that's got a big reputation with maybe college background or something else, or height or something that kind of screwed you up in our computer formula.
Oh, trust me. I remember, sorry, Ted. I remember signing up again when I was playing in the early 2000s and talking to all my buddies who played, and people I went to Grand Valley State, people who went to school there, and they were also playing. There was strategy to building your team.
Oh, yeah.
You'd want to find the correct height. You don't just want a bunch of 6'5" guys, or you don't want a bunch of guys that play college ball. There was a strategy to building your team. And I do remember you describing how it was back then when it was call your own fouls. When I was playing, I remember it was getting to the point where it was less about basketball and it was more about, could you outmuscle the other team? Could you because you have the stronger guys out on the court, and there was still a lot of really good basketball being played. But I do remember when you guys switched to having some officials on the courts, I thought that might be a good move, because it got a little out of hand sometimes.
Yeah, it really got. The problem is not only did you need physical ones, but you needed intimidated personalities.
Yeah,
right. Had to be jerks
to
get their calls, which caused this friction, and it didn't become as much fun to even run them anymore.
Right.
That going to the officials was like Wrigley with lights on and stuff. We just didn't really like it at first, but it was something that we probably had to do to survive.
Yeah.
The other thing you'll see today that's really, really weird, and you would be very surprised when you walk out, is at our more developed events, Ludington, Belding, some of those, we're 70 to 80% under the age of 18.
Yeah.
Wow.
You stand at center court and you think, like in Belding, we had 30 some courts, let's say 35 courts. We had 30 courts of kids and only 5 of adults. It's like Disney World.
Yeah.
Which really makes it for us kind of what we wanted to be, because when it was getting rougher, our competitors and stuff sometimes played off the inner city rough, tough, you got to win this kind of thing. And we were kind of going like, hey, we got to get away from this, because we're going to have a fight or a problem that's going to get out of control. and we're going to lose our image of being the hometown Midwest kind of
Right.
property that started in somebody's driveway. So we kind of ran away from that a little bit, and thank goodness we did, because most of the ones that went away, that's why they went away. It just got too rough.
I view you, Scott, almost like a czar of basketball. I mean, you talk about how it's like coming up on 50 years, all the games you've seen, all the championship teams, not these 3-on-3s. Two-part question. Who's the best player you've ever seen play in one of these tournaments?
Oh,
Ted. Got to be
yeah,
Ted,
there's-
right? Ted
was definitely the best.
he has the famous picture, that I'm sure Ted probably has. He played against Rob Pelinka.
That's
I mean,
right.
that has to be one of them, right?
Yeah.
My claim to fame.
I tell the story of going to these cities, and I'm in these pockets that are basketball pockets, and being in Peoria, Illinois, in their downtown, when they had a lot of Illini players from all over the Midwest. They had a lot of guards and so forth and so on. So I got to think that like a Sean Livingston that played for the Warriors for a while. I'm trying to think of my main guy that played at DePaul. He was just an amazing offensive player, and I'm forgetting his name right now, but it had to come out of that area, because when we were big, Peoria a couple times had 2 top men's divisions, and actually had on their center court at one time, out of 8 players playing against each other, 7 of them were major college and a few were NBA or ex-NBA players. It was really, really like crazy. So I gotta say that's probably where that best player would have came from. I saw, but we've had ex-NBA players playing quite a bit. I was in Port Huron, Michigan, and we were with 2,500 teams on the campus of their little community college there, and in the streets. And on one court, I couldn't get to the court because it was 10 people deep, and it was 7th to 8th graders, and I could see a hand up by the rim jumping around. I said, "Well, who's over there that everybody's watching?" Going, "It's the next Magic Johnson, a guy named Chris Webber."
Whoa.
Yeah, that'll do it.
I saw a lot of kids in it. That's where Sean Livingston came in. I saw a lot of kids that way in my event. Kobe Buffkin, that just played for the Hawks now. All of those kids, I've seen them from 9, 10, 11 years old go on to play. Never would have guessed they would have been one to go on to the NBA. But
awesome.
Chris Webber's was already quite popular at that point when he got there. But
is there, you might have honestly already answered it right there. Is there a certain game that really sticks out to you after all these years? A championship game, maybe a game winner that happened, anything like that?
Probably one of the best games was a Melvin McLaughlin team in Belding, where we were going to 20, and he scored 19 by himself. And the crowd had gathered around, and he always chose a team not quite as good as some of the other teams, because most of the people knew he was going to shoot every time.
Yeah, wanted a challenge.
He could shoot from way out there, and oh my God. So I can remember that particular game where he scored 19 out of 20 and they won, and the crowd almost carried him off the court. I had a few incidences like that. I've just had some really interesting run-ins with people that I never would have guessed either were going to be famous players or what have you, but they were just a lot of fun times over the years with the stuff like that.
You know, we just come out of kind of a tough era, Scott, with COVID. How did you guys deal with COVID? You know,
that hit us. That was 2020. We literally had no tournaments. And when you're in special event business, it's a seasonal cash flow totally. And oh my gosh, I honestly scratched my head not knowing. We had a lot of federal monies come, a lot of state monies, a lot of other people came and helped. It was amazing that we made it through with no tournaments, but we did. Prior to that, 2019, I had 40 tournaments, and this year I got 27. So I'm still recovering to get my number up closer to 40 or 50 tournaments. It's really, really taken a toll over the years, but it's amazing that we were able to make it through it. I mean, it just by the grace of God, and a lot of people that love Macker really are into Macker. Like Macker Man tattoos on their body. I mean, Yeah, there's some strange stuff. These people are really into it.
Got to be honest, I'm surprised Ted doesn't have a Macker man tattoo across his back.
should.
I mean, I'll be honest. I love Gus Macker too. It's been a while since I've played, but now that my nephew's getting into it, like I've said a few times now, it's kind of revitalized that love for Gus Macker. It's just such a cool experience. And I remember, again, going back to kind of Jared's question, memorable people. The former NBA player that played at Eastern Michigan, Earl Boykins.
Oh yeah,
he had like an AAU team. They would travel around the country and play in different tournaments and stuff. And I remember when I was playing, they were always in top men's, of course, but there was always the Earl Boykins team was playing at Gus Macker, and it was like the biggest deal. You would go to top men's and watch his team play. And like you said, 10 people deep right there on the beach. It was just people all around that center court watching the Earl Boykins team play. And that was always a cool experience. You kind of laid it out. I had a question, a friend that I actually played with on those teams. He fired off a few at me to maybe throw out. You've kind of answered a few of them about infrastructure, the city kind of telling you guys where the courts are going to be.
yeah.
But one that I thought that was interesting, and you've kind of answered it a little bit, but what's been one of the bigger challenges with the tournaments as far as maybe not letting it get too big, not letting it get out of control? Has it been the kids teams? Has it been the adult teams? Like you said about the physical play. Has it been the parents? You hear about little league parents, kind of take the fun out of things. What's kind of been one of the bigger challenges with, keeping everything, the original mission of what you guys had with Gus Macker?
I think the adult teams are probably the area of the tournament that's not very fun for people to come up on and watch.
Yeah.
We've been able to handle the parents. There's still issues with parents, and some of the parents are so carried away that Bobby or Jimmy are going to be in the NBA immediately and stuff. Right. And so there's a lot of that going on. And we see a lot of AAU type teams and so forth that are coming to our tournament that are very, very good. But I think the adult teams was the hardest phase, because when we went to officiating, that move was over a 1 to 5 year period. Not all of my tournaments went to that immediately because it cost a lot.
Yeah.
The cost to do a Macker of the general person on the street would be amazed at how much it costs to do one of ours. That stopped my growth a little bit past COVID. So I was at 40. A lot of cities dropped because they couldn't afford to do it. And they used COVID and said, well, now COVID's shutting us down. We're not going to probably come back. Mm-hmm. So I've gotten hundreds of requests. They just see how much it costs to do a Macker. And that's kind of part of the problem. Hiring the officials was that move that cost everybody. So to keep it clean like that, and the adult player did not enjoy us putting an official out there because most of them had adapted their game to call them their own and didn't want that other person out there who they went to regular games in a gym and didn't like anyway.
Right.
They didn't like that at all. By the way, that player that played at DePaul was David Booth. You guys go look up a guy named David Booth.
I remember him.
6'7", 6'8", but could play. He was probably the best offensive player I'd ever seen in my life play in a Macker. Awesome. I mean, he was just his skin and bones at his college, post-college. Played in the NBA, played CBA a little bit and stuff like that. But and he's now working for the NBA. He's like a scout on somebody's team.
When you look back on it, sorry, Matt. When you look back on it, is there like a certain? You mentioned coming some of these big tournaments you've had, these big games, 10 people wide around the court. I mean, it's just crazy to think about. It started in your driveway. Was there ever a real kind of? Maybe it was a SI article that was written about you. Was there a pinch me moment where you kind of was like, "Wow, I really did kind of help build this and made this into what it is now? This huge tournament that's on a national scale, statewide scale." Was there ever a big moment like that for you?
Well, it was when we were running those 5,000, 5,400 team tournaments in Belding, and we only lived like 10 blocks away, and you drive the golf cart and come down over the hill and see what they thought was 100,000 people in Belding at that time. I mean, those times were probably where you pinched yourself and went, this is not real kind of thing. Yeah.
Step back, think about that, listeners. 5,400 teams, 4 players on a team in Belding. For a weekend. I mean, I was part of that in the early 90s. Belding and Gaylord were the two that I played in because I got relatives that live up north, and it's just a festival. It was just incredible, and it continues on. It's just a amazing accomplishment by you, Scott, and your team there. I mean, we can't say enough praise for what you've done, and 50th anniversary. So what do we got to look forward to moving ahead?
Well, I think the big thing for us is to try to get that number closer to 50 tournaments too, again,
Right.
which right now, if you look at my schedule, out of 27 tournaments, I think 15 are in Michigan. I mean, we could
Right.
go anywhere in Michigan and run a tournament right
Yeah.
now, but we lost kind of our following. Not that they don't want tournaments. It's just those groups have fallen by the wayside in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin. We don't got quite as many there. We have a lot of interest. It'll be interesting to see we get those up. So for us, it's to grab that number back up and get it viable. I'm at an age now, and everything's pretty interesting. My team that travels, I have a lot of retirees now on my team, traveling from city to city, or bankers or retired teachers or what have you on my team, where 5-10 years ago, they were all college kids.
Right.
Now
Right.
we don't have as many college kids working. They don't want to work that hard.
Right.
They like to travel, but I don't know if they're into it that much. They don't really have the Macker bug. Like,
Yeah.
there's few that do, but wow, these guys that are, I can't imagine how I'm going to get that much of my future is to figure out how I can bring some of the youth into my organization that want to stick with it and see it go to the next level. Because I'm going to be 68 this summer, and I could think I can do it forever, but I'm got to be realistic. I don't know that I'm going to be able to do
Yeah.
it.
Well, I
It's
can
kinda-
see it. I
It's
can
kind
see
of
it.
like Ted with this podcast.
Exactly.
He says he wants to keep doing it, but we know there's going to come a day where he tells Jared and I, you know what, guys, unless we're recording at 7 a.m, I'm not going to be able to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's one of those two guys that'll bail first. I like this.
Yeah, you'll keep
It's
doing it.
it's
Ted.
easy. It's
Yeah.
easy.
I was
Hey,
going to bring up before. I don't know if Ted or Jared got anything. I have to share this for anyone watching on YouTube. We share this podcast on YouTube also. I got to share this photo, this little collage, I guess I put together of us guys. So obviously you can tell the pictures that are from Ted's days.
Yeah.
yeah.
So the two on the bottom are from my days up there in Ludington. The one up there with the little guys, that's Jared. It's not a Gus Macker because Jared, like he said, he didn't actually play in a Gus Macker. That's a tournament back in our hometown. But so yeah, those are some throwback 3-on-3s from the 3 Point Podcast guys.
Yeah. Our three views. Well, listen, Scott, I mean, this has been a blast catching up with you. I mean, we're all fans of Gus Macker. Hey, maybe Matt has some connections and there'll be a 30 for 30 or an E60 on Gus Macker. You never know. Not a bad idea.
Could be a good idea.
For
That would be
real.
a lot of fun.
Yeah, but we appreciate the time, Scott. We'll catch up with you down the road, and best way for our listeners to see what's going on with Mackerville and maybe how to participate and join one of the tournaments.
Make sure they go to macker.com.
Perfect.
And I always leave everybody with work on your game.
Yep.
Even me. You sent it in my email. I'm always
that.
working. Always
Yeah.
working. We appreciate it, Scott. Thanks for the time, man.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
All right.
Are you ready to take your brand to the next level? Look no further. Introducing AZ Branding Solutions, where we help grow your brand from A to Z. At AZ, we're committed to helping businesses and organizations like yours reach new heights. Our full-service print and digital branding agency is your one-stop destination for all things branding. Need a stunning web or graphic design that captures your essence? We've got you covered. Want captivating social media content that engages your audience? Done. And that's not all. We're experts in video production and photography, ensuring your brand tells a compelling visual story. Plus, we specialize in screen printing and embroidery, turning your brand into wearable art that speaks volumes. Whether you're a startup or an established business, AZ is here to transform your brand dreams into reality. Ready to grow with us? Partner with AZ today and experience the difference. Visit our website at www.az.co or give us a call at 1-844-360-AZEE. AZ Branding Solutions, where your success begins.
Jacobs Insurance Agency has served Shiawassee County and the surrounding areas since 1977. Just like 3 Point Podcast, we've had 3 generations: Gary Jacobs Sr., Gary Jacobs II, Brian Jacobs, and myself, Noah Jacobs, serving our community with offices in Waterford and Owasso on M21, just west of Home Depot. Stop in or go online to jacobsinsurance.com to get a quote or get your questions answered by our team. Jacobs Insurance is a proud supporter of our local schools and the proud sponsor of the Prep Spotlight. Insure everything, local, independent, and trusted. It's our family working together to protect yours. That's the Jacobs way.